Few groups of antagonists can be said to have had the lasting impact and continual thematic relevancy as the Phantom Troupe of Hunter x Hunter. Introduced into the narrative as Class A criminals who even most blacklist hunters would avoid unless absolutely necessary, responsible for the gruesome massacre of the Kurta, and thus the motivation in Kurapika's path to become a hunter, and with recent chapters revealing their origin as a collective of poor kids who aspire to be actors until the tragic death of one of their own set all but one on the path of darkness and revenge, now sets them up as a poetic parallel to the one who seeks revenge against them, who, in a further act of irony, was saved from the massacre in part because of the chance meeting and kindness of the one member of the original troupe who denied this darkness. Yet, what is just as interesting as the ironic component to this ongoing storyline is the meta-element of this origin. Hunter x Hunter has been called deconstructive for the way it plays with the expectations of the audience through the author's understanding of those expectations as the creator of a previous work in the same genre and demographic, Yu Yu Hakusho. And in understanding where that work faltered and succeeded, and in what is to be expected of this kind of manga, Togashi-sensei has woven Hunter x Hunter to feel unlike anything else. Something that at once captures the appeal of the action-adventures iconic of Shonen Jump, as it is a subversion of them. The Phantom Troupe are merely one example of this, but one where this approach is on full display and is at once complementary to the convention of a small and elite collective of antagonists with a personal vendetta against, or at least some reason to target, the protagonists, yet contradictory in how this same approach is taking the familiar is handled elsewhere, and given this origin story, it has become apparent that this is clearly purposeful. The Phantom Troupe act like they are not in Hunter x Hunter, but instead a more conventional action series. Notice that most subgroups within the series tend to either lack a common trend to unite them beyond a very broad one, such as an animal theme, and done in a very understated, even boring manner, something recurring and done multiple times across multiple different groups to the point of repetition, yet by contrast the troupe are brimming with personality in their design, arranging them around a specific idea or aesthetic. Nobunaga dresses like a samurai, Machi a ninja, Hisoka a clown. Thinks, depending on the situation, will dress either as a pharaoh or, for pragmatic reasons, opt to wear a tracksuit. Franklin, Bonolenov, and Kotopi invoke the images of pop culture monsters, and Pakunoda's scantily clad suit invokes the stereotype of a female right hand or officer in an anime or tokusatsu, one to that very leader in Crollo Lucifer, a man named after the devil, whose all-black windbreaker with a furry white texture beneath the black, and with an upside-down cross perhaps meant to invoke a rebellion against a religious idea or concept. Perhaps the very notion of goodness as an absolute espoused in doctrine, again invoking the concept of the head boss of a villainous group. This is purposeful. They are donning the aesthetic of a stereotypical villain group, one that makes pop culture references and treats parallels possessed to similar groups in other media with respect. And just as important as this villainous aesthetic is their corresponding attitude. Nen in Hunter x Hunter is a closely guarded secret, systematically justified to prevent highly dangerous people from getting access to it, an idea that could be explored with Serednik, and on an individual level for the pragmatic purpose of preventing a tactical weakness from being exposed in combat, keeping the other party on edge and perhaps overly cautious. Yet the troupe buck this trend by making a point to showcase their existence and the powers that they have access to, as perhaps best exemplified in York New City, when the troupe pursues Squala, showcasing their abilities and willingness to kill in cold blood in this single-minded pursuit while in the full view of witnesses left stunned at what they had seen. Things atypical for Hunter x Hunter, but common in the more conventional action-adventure, where the reveling in powers is the norm and a more cartoonish, over-the-top form of evil is the character. An idea that the troupe strives for even now. When Ubogen was a child, he proclaimed a desire to be the greatest villain, a part he wished to act out and would later truly become as the 11th leg of the spider, causing widespread destruction for the sake of it, aspiring towards that simplistic view of a villain and reveling in getting to play that role, as if showcasing that on some level they are still putting on a show to honor that original dream of being a troupe of performers. That said, the role of the villain is only one element to the Phantom Troupe's purposeful meta-element. The second is how they, ironically, also invoke the tropes and conventions of unlikely bands of heroes, the protagonists of a more stereotypical work. Their strong shared bonds with even members from outside of Meteor City aiding in the protection of something held dear to their close-knit comrades despite not sharing any apparent attachment to is a foundational element to groups such as these by themselves, be it a hometown like Meteor City or a comrade like Crollo. The troupe's origin of Meteor City juvenile miscreants who recruited more members to their cause as they continued on their adventures outside of the confines of the law, and yet also in conflict with organized crime and the dark underbelly of the world, overcoming whatever obstacles may lie before them, be them assassins or mercenaries hired by the elite and privileged, or some other organized force that wish to take what the troupe has or want to protect. Later additions to the troupe from outside their aforementioned hometown with Bono Lenov, a warrior coming from a tribe of atypical practices, and Kaluto, a child connected to an enemy of the troupe both finding a place within the ranks, also herald back to groups that the protagonist would typically be the founder or at least a part of, and how these groups would come to be welcoming to those outside or oppressed by wider society, while still fighting against an evil of some sort. The Straw Hat Pirates, for example, began as a small collective of small-time rookies from the quiet East Blue Sea, where the likes of a cryptid, undead skeleton, and even former adversary would find belonging as members of. Pirates that lead revolutions to free the oppressed countries and cities in much the same way that the Spiders liberated Meteor City. Finally, Franklin noted that though they both preferred to fight alone like a stereotypical villain, both Uvo and Nobunaga actually brought out the best of each other when working together, akin to the heroes of those same fictional stories, their bond bringing them to even greater heights than they could have achieved alone. In hindsight, it comes as no surprise why members resonated so strongly with Gon's innocence, because on some level they see themselves and or others of the troupe in Gon, a youth pursuing a simple dream, a unity found in simple friendships, and the desire to protect those he cares for, all things that the troupe's members can empathize strongly with, and perhaps why they feel like he'd be a perfect addition. More than just someone with a similar power to the deceased Uvogin, but perhaps even as the very thing that those who's resonated with Gon may want on some level. Someone willing to do what the founding members and Shayla did not. Choose to stand by a previous friend and save them from fully falling into the darkness. And perhaps now that he's fallen into that darkness, that all-encompassing toxic desire for revenge, and now having achieved it at great personal cost, and yet also brought back from the brink of oblivion through the efforts of a cherished friend, perhaps can offer an insight at that darkness better than he could have when he first confronted and questioned them on their path in life. One that mirrors the Haley family, a group that only wants to watch the world burn, fueled by the anger and despair that Nobunaga resonates with and believes similar to the troops. A power growing ever stronger towards that goal with each kill. And with the story having just resumed in the midst of the intricate moving pieces that parallel the troops so, with Kurapika, the one who seeks revenge against them just as they did with Sarasa's killer, the aforementioned Haley family, and finally Hisoka, the villain that they all once aspired to be and played a role of, but without the close-knit bonds that kept them from truly falling into madness. As well as the two newest recruits to the troupe, who could themselves reveal a new perspective to their role as performers, turning their show into reality. The eldest and youngest of the Zoldycks. One who, like Hisoka, is not playing the villain, but is a cold-hearted monster, and the other, who, like the troupe when they first formed, is still trying to find his place in the world. And so, one must wonder now, what role will the troupe play in the trip to the new continent? That of villainous thieves out for blood, and to rob for no real reason other than that they are bandits, or perhaps those of heroes, doing the odd philanthropic work that has been mentioned in passing before, standing for or against the rage and despair that formed them, or perhaps the system that would enable a man like Serednik to exist and thrive in this darkness, the man who perhaps echoes the troupe the most in both origins and operation. A man who turns the death of others into an art for him to enjoy, much like the killers of Sarasa did when they made a film out of her gruesome torture and death. A parallel to the one they swore revenge on, and who they became alike in the process of. Routine displays of brutality and depravity that the troupe are only known to perform in the genocide of the Kurta, and yet have never repeated since. The Chimera Ants, those that attacked and occupied their homeland, were brutally dealt with and suffered, but not to the same extent that either the Kurta or Serednik's victims have. leaving a burning question as to why the Kurta had to suffer so. And perhaps as well, what will the spider's reaction to a man like Serednik be? A man of privilege who not only enables but revels in the darkness and depravity, finding beauty where even the spider may glare in contempt. Having lost a cherished friend to one who thinks similarly to the fourth prince, and when the time of this clash comes, what shall be the form that the darkness of the spider resembles? That of the aimless wrath of Kurapika, one who could no longer deny the humanity of the spider after taking their leader hostage for the return of his friends, or the darkness of Serednik, a man who echoes everything that caused and allowed Sarasa to be taken from them. Perhaps instead, like Nobunaga has observed, this darkness will instead resemble that of Morena Prudo, a woman born, denied, forever scarred, and condemned to the darkness, only to paradoxically be allowed to continue existing. As this darkness of both the spider and Kurapika blur, one where the innocent beginnings, where what mattered most was lost, and a violent present where both still have something they wish to and can protect, begin and end, one must wonder where both sides now stand, and where they shall stand once the dust settles. Have they arrived closer to a light at the end of their dark path, or are they now closer to becoming the depravity that begun it all? Only time will tell. With Hunter x Hunter having finally returned to publication after a brutally long hiatus, and with the recent reveal of Beyond's own machinations, his own darkness cast over the succession war in the form of disposable pawns to support a candidate of his own choosing, and the looming threats of Gyro, Periston, and the calamities from the Dark Continent on the horizon, I cannot help but feel excited to see and talk more about this masterpiece in the future. And there is much to discuss about the thematic uses of darkness and light specifically in this dynamic narrative, perhaps best exemplified through the use of Gon and Killua. One's journey causing the loss of innocence and the other's a gaining of. Until such a video arrives, I'd appreciate a like for the engagement, as well as some comments to further the discourse, and perhaps even give me some ideas on what to talk about in the future down below in the comments section. Until that time, perhaps my video on Gintama from earlier this year, or a video as recommended to you by the YouTube algorithm would strike your fancy. My next video on Persona should be out next week, so subscribe and hit the bell to see it as soon as it is available if what you've seen from my channel so far has you interested. Until next time, I am Bilal Kun, and I hope everybody has a great week.